The sky was a soft gray, the kind that hinted at rain but held back just enough to allow the wind to stir the leaves gently. A sleek, black luxury car purred as it slowly came to a stop on the edge of a modest neighborhood where the houses stood close together, each one weathered by time and life. The car stood out like a diamond in the dust, polished, perfect, foreign. The door clicked open, and a tall woman in her late 30s stepped out, her heels clicking against the cracked pavement. Amelia adjusted the beige wool coat wrapped around her shoulders and glanced at the small house before her, number 14, with its peeling paint, sagging porch, and rusted mailbox hanging by a thread. Her perfectly manicured hand trembled slightly as she reached for her designer purse, not from the cold, but from something much deeper, uncertainty. 10 years. A decade had passed since she last saw Clara, her best friend, her sister in spirit, her anchor during the stormy years of their childhood. They had been inseparable once, before life spun them into different orbits. Clara had stayed behind in their small hometown, while Amelia had left to chase her ambitions. And she had succeeded. Now a millionaire, Amelia had built an empire of fashion and luxury, traveled the world, and stood on stages, but not once had she come back. Not until today. She looked down at her reflection in the car's tinted window, flawless makeup, sculpted cheekbones, confidence. But her heart fluttered with unease. Would Clara even recognize her? Would she be angry? Hurt? Amelia wasn't sure what had drawn her back exactly, perhaps a dream, a memory, or guilt that had finally grown too loud to ignore. She walked toward the porch, her footsteps heavy with memories. Each creak of the wooden boards beneath her heels echoed like a heartbeat. She reached up to knock, hesitated, then finally tapped the door gently. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, inside, she heard footsteps, light, hurried. The doorknob turned, and just like that, time stood still. The door opened with a soft creak, revealing a woman framed in the warm, yellow light of the home behind her. Clara stood there, frozen in the doorway, wearing a faded apron over a plain sweater and jeans. Her auburn hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands falling loose around her face. There were tired shadows under her eyes, and fine lines that hadn't been there 10 years ago. But to Amelia, she was instantly familiar, the same gentle eyes, the same quiet strength she remembered from childhood. Clara's eyes widened the moment they met Amelia's. For a heartbeat, she seemed unsure whether she was dreaming. Then emotion surged behind her gaze, and her lips parted in a breathless whisper. Amelia. Amelia managed a small, uncertain smile, her voice soft. Hi, Clara. The space between them disappeared in an instant. Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Amelia. The hug wasn't graceful or rehearsed, it was raw, filled with years of silence, unanswered letters, and questions never asked. Amelia stood stiff for a second before melting into the embrace. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of cinnamon and old wood that clung to Clara's clothes, so different from the sterile perfumes of boardrooms and gala events. They pulled back slowly, both brushing away tears with awkward laughter. You look incredible, Clara said, a touch of disbelief in her voice. And you look like home, Amelia replied, her throat tightening. Clara stepped aside and gestured Amelia in. Come in, come in. It's freezing out there. Amelia hesitated for just a second before stepping across the threshold. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like a blanket, not just the heat from the old radiator humming in the corner, but the quiet, lived-in comfort of the space. Faint music played from an old radio in the kitchen. A handmade quilt lay folded on the couch. There were crayons scattered on a low table, beside a stack of picture books. Amelia's eyes took it all in, the chipped walls, the threadbare rug, the subtle aroma of something baking in the oven. It was a stark contrast to the polished, sterile luxury of her penthouse. And yet, something about it made her chest ache. Clara led her to the small sofa and poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs. I never thought I'd see you again, she said softly. I didn't think I'd come back, Amelia admitted. But something told me, it was time. In that moment, nothing else existed, not the years apart, not the lives they'd lived. Just 2 women, once girls who dreamed under the same stars, sitting again across from each other, hearts quietly starting to mend. Amelia sat on the edge of the worn sofa, her legs crossed neatly, trying not to appear out of place, though everything in the room made her feel like a stranger in a life she could barely recognize. The teacup in her hand was delicate but chipped at the rim, and the herbal aroma rising from it was earthy, unfamiliar, nothing like the espresso she usually drank from her marble-countered kitchen in New York. She sipped anyway, politely, her eyes wandering across the room with subtle curiosity. The living room was small, modest, and full of signs that real life happened here. A family photograph, slightly crooked in its frame, hung above the fireplace. The coffee table bore faint crayon marks, like faded battle scars from some earlier war of creativity. In the corner, a small bookshelf leaned slightly under the weight of children's books and old paperbacks. Every surface held little things: hand-painted flower pots, tiny origami cranes, a jar filled with buttons, things that didn't match, didn't belong to any designer brand, but felt warm and deeply human. Amelia shifted uncomfortably, careful not to spill tea on the floral cushion beneath her. Clara noticed and gave a soft chuckle, wiping her hands on her apron as she joined her on the couch. "I know it's not what you're used to," Clara said gently, sensing the tension. "But it's mine. All of it. It's beautiful," Amelia said, and she meant it, though the word felt too small. The room didn't scream wealth or style, but it breathed love. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. There was a pause between them, a silence not awkward, but thick with thoughts unspoken. Amelia wanted to ask everything at once: how Clara had been, what her life looked like now, why they had fallen out of touch so completely. But none of the questions made it to her lips. Instead, Clara filled the space. "It's been a busy day," she said, glancing toward the hallway. "I was just finishing up dinner when you knocked. I didn't expect company, especially not you." "I didn't call ahead," Amelia replied, setting her cup down. "I didn't want to give you a chance to say no." Clara smiled faintly. "I don't think I ever could have." Just then, a soft giggle echoed from behind the hallway wall, light, airy, unmistakably the laughter of a child. Amelia froze, her gaze shooting toward the source. Small footsteps followed, tapping rapidly on the floor. Her heart picked up its pace, caught off guard. She hadn't seen or heard a man around. Was Clara married? Did she have kids? Before she could ask, a young boy tumbled into the room, his messy dark curls bouncing, cheeks flushed with excitement. He wore a superhero shirt, one sleeve stained with something purple, juice or marker, Amelia guessed. He stopped when he saw her, eyes wide, curious but cautious. Right behind him came a little girl, smaller and barefoot, clinging to a stuffed rabbit with matted fur. Her eyes were big and bright, her curls loose and wild. She peeked out from behind her brother, gripping the hem of his shirt with one hand. "Mama," the boy said, looking up at Clara, "who's that?" Clara reached out and pulled both children close, resting a hand on each of their backs. "This is Amelia," she said softly, looking from the children to her guest. "She's an old friend of mine. From before you were born." Amelia blinked, her gaze fixed on the two children. Something stirred in her, something old and aching. The boy's eyes, especially, held a spark that struck a distant, almost forgotten chord deep inside her. She opened her mouth to speak but said nothing. "Say hello, sweethearts," Clara encouraged gently. "Hi," the boy said shyly. The girl whispered her own greeting, barely audible. "Hello," Amelia replied, forcing a smile, though her chest felt suddenly heavy. As the children climbed onto Clara's lap, snuggling into her as if this was just another quiet evening, Amelia sat still, her mind racing. The room felt different now, not just a space shaped by memories and struggle, but by secrets. Two children, a mother, and a woman returning after a decade, unaware that the past she thought she'd left behind had been quietly growing roots in the very place she'd abandoned. Amelia couldn't take her eyes off them, the little boy and girl curled up beside Clara, both so at ease, as if their day hadn't just been interrupted by a stranger from another world. The boy was studying her carefully, but it was his eyes that caught her breath. There was something so unmistakable about them, the shape, the intensity, the quiet intelligence behind them. A part of her couldn't stop staring, even though she knew it was impolite. Because those eyes, she had seen them before. Lived with them, grieved them. They were her brothers. Her breath hitched so subtly it was barely noticeable, but inside, something shifted violently. The boy turned his attention back to Clara and asked in a whisper, "Can we have cookies now, Mama?" Clara gave a soft laugh. "After dinner, you know the rules." The girl tugged on Clara's apron and asked, "Did she bring presents?" Clara smiled warmly. No, sweetie, Amelia came just to visit. She doesn't need to bring anything. I could bring something next time, Amelia offered, trying to sound normal, casual, but her voice was tight around the edges. Clara gave her a grateful look but didn't say anything. The children, seemingly satisfied, slid off the couch and ran into the kitchen, their tiny feet tapping against the linoleum. Amelia watched them go, her mind spinning. Her brother, Daniel, had been gone for nearly 8 years. Killed in a car crash during one of his business trips. It had been sudden, cruel, and deeply scarring. She had mourned him with her whole being. He had been her best friend, her only family after their parents died. They had talked nearly every day, or so she thought. Now, sitting across from Clara, she suddenly felt as though she hadn't known him at all. She turned toward Clara, her voice trembling. Clara, those children. Clara stiffened slightly but didn't look away. I wondered how long it would take. Amelia blinked. Take for what? For you to see him in them, Clara whispered. Silence stretched between them. The distant sound of the children laughing in the kitchen only made the stillness in the living room feel heavier. Amelia sat up straighter. Are you telling me? Her voice caught. Clara, are they Daniel's? Clara hesitated, her eyes glistening. Then she nodded, slowly. Yes, they're his. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Amelia stared, stunned, trying to process what she was hearing. Her mind immediately tried to fill in the missing years, the possibilities, the questions that came crashing down like a wave. But, how? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? Clara folded her hands in her lap and took a deep breath. Because when it happened, it was already too late. He was gone. And you were grieving. You had just taken over his company. You were drowning in work and press and responsibilities. I didn't want to throw this into your world too. But Clara, he was my brother. I should have known. I didn't want pity, Clara said firmly, eyes wet but steady. And I didn't want money. I wanted to raise them in peace, without the weight of his name, without them growing up under a microscope. Amelia stood and paced a few steps toward the window, then turned back, visibly shaken. You kept his children from me. Clara's lips trembled, but she didn't break. I kept them safe. I loved him, Amelia. I never meant to keep them hidden to hurt you. But you left. And I didn't know if we'd ever speak again. Amelia's hands trembled slightly at her sides. She turned back toward the hallway, as if expecting the children to come running back, laughing again. But now she saw them differently. Not just children, her niece and nephew. Blood. A piece of Daniel still breathing in this world, and she hadn't known they existed. She sat down slowly, overwhelmed. Clara, I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, Clara said gently. Just, stay for dinner. Please. Amelia looked at her. The woman who had once been her closest friend, now a stranger with 2 living reminders of a brother she thought she had buried completely. Emotions stormed behind her eyes, anger, betrayal, sorrow, and something else. A fragile, aching hope. She nodded slowly. Okay, I'll stay. Dinner was simple, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, and baked chicken, but the smell alone wrapped the house in comfort, and the warmth from the oven mixed with the soft kitchen light gave the room a gentle glow. Clara moved about the small kitchen with practiced ease, plates clinking softly as she served the food. Amelia sat at the modest dining table, hands folded tightly in her lap, watching with a storm of emotions she hadn't quite named yet. The children were already seated, chatting happily about cartoons and school, seemingly unaffected by the adult tension that hung like a veil between the 2 women. Clara sat down last, her apron dusted with flour, and placed a bowl of bread in the center of the table. She looked up, meeting Amelia's eyes for a moment, then quickly shifted her attention to the children. Okay, who's saying grace tonight? She asked. I will. The little girl shouted, lifting her hand eagerly. Go ahead, Mia, Clara said with a smile. Amelia's chest clenched again. Mia. Her brother had always said if he ever had a daughter, he would name her something soft, something short and sweet. Hearing the name spoken aloud from the mouth of a child who looked so much like him felt like a ghost passing through the room. After a quick and innocent blessing, the children dug in. Amelia picked at her plate, her appetite long lost in the flood of revelation. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. Clara, she said quietly, so the children wouldn't notice. Why didn't Daniel tell me? I talk to him every week. We were close. We told each other everything. Clara paused, setting her fork down. Because he was scared. Scared of what? Amelia asked, voice sharp, too loud. One of the kids glanced up. Clara gave her a look. Lower your voice, and Amelia nodded, biting her lip. He didn't want to complicate things between you two, Clara said more softly now. He knew how protective you were of him. How skeptical you were of people he dated. He thought if he told you about us, you'd think it was some small-town fling. He wanted time. He planned to tell you. But then the accident. Her voice broke off. Amelia stared at her, her throat tight. You loved him? She asked quietly, almost a whisper. Clara nodded, her eyes glistening. So much. We tried to keep it private, at least until we were sure. By the time we knew about the kids, he was already gone. Amelia stared down at her food. Her vision blurred. She didn't even try to stop the tears. All this time, I thought I lost him completely. I had no idea. You didn't lose everything, Clara said gently. You still have them. Amelia looked over at the children, who were now laughing at a joke only they understood. The boy, Jacob, Clara had said, had her brother's eyebrows, that little crooked smile. Mia had his dimples, his spark. You raised them on your own? She asked. Clara nodded. I didn't tell anyone who their father was. Not even my parents. I wanted to protect them. I didn't want people judging them, or chasing them because of Daniel's legacy. Amelia leaned back in her chair, stunned by the weight of it all. You've been through all of this alone. You've raised his children in this little house, with no help, no acknowledgement, while I was giving speeches in glass buildings and posing for magazines. I never envied you, Amelia, Clara said kindly. I was proud of you. But my life went in a different direction. And for what it's worth, I don't regret it. I see him every day in their faces. Amelia wiped at her cheeks, embarrassed by the tears but unable to stop them. I wish I had known. I wish I could have been part of it. Clara smiled sadly. You still can be. The boy suddenly looked up. Aunt Amelia, he asked, the title unfamiliar on his tongue. Amelia froze. Clara gave him a gentle nod, and he smiled. Can you come to my soccer game next week? Amelia swallowed hard. I'd love to, she whispered. And for the first time since she walked through that door, she felt something unfamiliar and yet deeply healing, belonging. The house had fallen quiet after dinner. The kids had been tucked into bed, their soft voices still echoing faintly through the hallway, a mix of bedtime questions and whispered jokes only siblings understood. Amelia sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the soft ticking of the wall clock marking the silence. Her hands were wrapped around a fresh cup of tea Clara had offered, though it had gone untouched. The air felt thick now, heavier than before, not with secrets but with everything left unsaid. Clara returned from the hallway, having kissed the children goodnight, and joined Amelia in the living room. She settled into the worn armchair across from her, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward this time, it was full of weight, like the stillness before a storm. You're angry, Clara finally said, her voice quiet but firm. You've been holding it in all evening. Amelia let out a bitter laugh, low and weary. Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. Clara looked down, her hands resting in her lap. I know. Amelia set her cup aside and stood, pacing slowly across the room, her heels muffled by the old rug. You kept my brother's children a secret from me, Clara. For years. You let me believe I had no family left. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I do, Clara said softly. And I hated myself for it every day. Then why? Amelia turned, eyes flashing, her voice cracking. Why would you shut me out like that? I wasn't some distant cousin, Clara. I was his sister. I am their aunt. Clara stood now too, but didn't approach. She looked tired, worn down, but unflinching. Because I was scared. I was grieving. I was raising 2 children alone with no support, no help. And I didn't want to drag you into it. You think I wouldn't have helped. I didn't know what you would have done, Clara said. We hadn't spoken in years. You left without a word. Amelia froze. That's not fair. Clara took a breath. Isn't it? After Daniel died, you stopped answering my messages. You buried yourself in work, in press conferences and luxury and control. I get it. You needed something to hold on to. But I was grieving too. I was carrying his children, and you were gone. Amelia's voice faltered. I didn't know. I thought you were just someone he dated. I didn't know it was that serious. It was everything, Clara whispered. We were going to move in together. He had already started looking for a house. And then, that accident. It broke something in me. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. Amelia turned away, her back to Clara now. Her shoulders rose and fell with each ragged breath. I was lost, she admitted. When he died, I felt like the world swallowed me. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I barely wanted to wake up. He was the only person I had left. And I had to survive with that same hole, Clara said, her voice trembling now. But I couldn't collapse. I had two lives growing inside me. There it was, the shared grief neither had known the other carried. They stood in that silence again, this time more fragile, more intimate. Amelia turned slowly, her eyes softer now, though still brimming with emotion. You should have told me. I know, Clara said. But I wasn't sure you'd even come back. Or that you'd want them. Amelia blinked. How could I not want them? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. Because they would have been a reminder of him, of loss, of everything we couldn't fix. Amelia crossed the room, finally sitting beside Clara on the edge of the couch. The gap between them had closed, not just physically but emotionally. Their eyes met, red, tired, and vulnerable. I'm not angry because I hate you, Amelia said. I'm angry because I missed out. I missed their first words, their birthdays, their scraped knees, their laughter. I missed him in them. Clara nodded, her own tears falling now. And I'm sorry for all of that. Truly. They sat in silence, both crying softly, not trying to wipe away the tears anymore. For the first time in 10 years, they were speaking honestly, not as two women on opposite ends of a life divided by choices, but as two hearts broken by the same tragedy. Amelia looked toward the hallway, where the children now slept peacefully. I want to be in their lives, she said quietly. I want to make up for everything I missed. Clara reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. Then stay. Be part of their world. We'll figure the rest out. And in that moment, something shifted. The weight of the past didn't disappear, but it no longer felt impossible to carry. Together, they could share it. Piece by piece. The night stretched long and quiet, the kind of stillness that came only after emotional storms had passed. The clock ticked softly in the corner, a steady rhythm that somehow matched the slow, healing calm that had finally settled between the two women. Amelia sat curled on the sofa now, barefoot, her heels left abandoned by the door. Her coat was draped neatly on the armrest, and her posture had softened, no longer guarded or tense, but open in a way she hadn't been in years. Across from her, Clara sat on the floor with her legs tucked beneath her, sipping tea from the same chipped mug she always used. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders, and for the first time since Amelia had arrived, her face looked peaceful. They weren't speaking now, and they didn't need to. The quiet between them no longer felt heavy, it felt shared. The kids had stirred once or twice, but quickly drifted back into sleep. The house was steeped in stillness, the kind that only came with true exhaustion, the emotional kind, the kind that leaves you raw but strangely relieved. Outside, a breeze pushed through the trees, brushing against the windows like a gentle whisper. I forgot what this felt like, Amelia finally said, her voice soft. Just being in a place where it's okay to breathe. Clara smiled faintly. That's all this house ever was. Nothing fancy. But it's safe. For me, for them. For anyone who needs it. Amelia leaned her head back against the sofa cushion, staring up at the ceiling. You gave them something I never had growing up. A home. A real one. So did Daniel, Clara replied. They have his kindness. His stubbornness too. Amelia laughed quietly, wiping a tear from her cheek before it had a chance to fall. God, he was stubborn. He never let me win an argument unless I cried. Clara chuckled. He used to do the same with me, except he'd give in when I cooked. It was his weakness. You mean food was his weakness? True. They both laughed gently, not the loud, performative laughter of catching up with someone after years apart, but the quiet kind, full of recognition and remembrance. They were no longer strangers in the same room. The years between them hadn't vanished, but they had loosened, faded slightly under the weight of shared memory. I kept telling myself I didn't need to come back here, Amelia said. That I had no reason. But something kept gnawing at me. A dream, maybe. Or guilt. Or Maybe just loneliness. Clara tilted her head. You've been surrounded by people. Haven't you? Famous ones. Important ones. Amelia nodded. And not one of them ever knew me like you did. They sat in silence again, this time comforted by it. Amelia shifted slightly, her voice suddenly more serious. Did they know anything about him? About Daniel? Clara nodded. Bits and pieces. I've told them stories. That he was brave. That he was kind. That he loved them even though he never got to meet them. Amelia's brows furrowed. They've never asked who their father was. They've asked. I told them he was someone special. But I never gave them a name. I didn't want them carrying the weight of a legacy they didn't understand. I think they deserve to know, Amelia said, her tone careful. They will. Now that you're here, maybe it's time. Amelia looked toward the hallway again. She could imagine them waking up in the morning, rubbing sleep from their eyes, running into the kitchen like they'd done tonight. And now, she would be here. She could see them grow. Hear them laugh. Learn their habits, their fears, their dreams. The thought made her chest ache, not with pain, but with a kind of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Clara, she said slowly, I'd like to stay. At least for a while. I want to get to know them. I want them to know me. Clara smiled, eyes glossy. I was hoping you'd say that. Amelia exhaled, as if releasing years of breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. I've spent so long building this perfect life, penthouses, private jets, endless events. And I don't even know who I am in any of it. But here, I feel like I remember. Because you were always this person, Clara said gently. Before the world changed you. A comfortable silence fell again. This time, when Clara rose to gather the mugs, Amelia followed her into the kitchen. They moved around each other with the ease of old friends, handing over plates, rinsing glasses, wiping down counters, like no time had passed at all. Later, as they stepped out onto the front porch to catch the breeze, Amelia looked up at the stars peeking through the thin clouds. Do you think he would have been a good father? Clara didn't hesitate. He would have been amazing. I want to tell them about him. Maybe tomorrow. Then we'll do it together, Clara said. They deserve that. And in the stillness of that moment, under the quiet sky, in the home that had once been a mystery, something deep within Amelia finally settled. Not in sadness, and not in regret. But in something closer to peace. Morning broke gently over the small neighborhood, casting a golden hue over the rooftops and seeping through the curtains of Clara's modest home. Birds chirped outside, and the occasional hum of a distant lawnmower added a quiet rhythm to the dawn. Inside the house, warmth clung to the air like a comforting quilt, not just from the rising sun, but from something far deeper, the sense that healing had begun. Amelia stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cool tiles, dressed in a soft sweater and simple jeans Clara had loaned her. Her designer wardrobe, once so defining, now felt like a costume she had shed overnight. Her hair was loosely tied back, and she held a spatula in one hand as she carefully flipped pancakes on the stovetop, a small smile tugging at her lips. It was a strange but welcome feeling, to be doing something so ordinary. Clara watched from the doorway, arms folded, a look of quiet amusement on her face. Never thought I'd see you cooking. I've cooked, Amelia said defensively, grinning. Once, maybe twice. A very long time ago. Clara laughed and crossed over to help pour juice into glasses. The scent of breakfast filled the house, butter, maple syrup, and the soft, yeasty aroma of rising bread Clara had prepared. The night before, it was a feast not born from wealth, but from love. Down the hall, small feet pounded against the floorboards. Jacob and Mia burst into the kitchen in a flurry of laughter and sleepy energy, still in their pajamas. Their hair stuck up in different directions, and their cheeks were pink with sleep. Jacob skidded to a stop when he saw Amelia at the stove. Are you making pancakes? He asked in awe. Trying to, Amelia replied, handing him a slightly uneven one on a plate. No promises about the taste. Mia peeked up at her shyly. You stayed the night. I did, Amelia said softly, kneeling to the girl's height. And I'm staying for a while. If that's okay with you. The little girl smiled, her grip tightening around the stuffed bunny she still held. It's okay. They all sat around the table together, 4 plates between them, conversation flowing easily, talk of school, cartoons, and the upcoming soccer game Jacob was so excited about. Amelia listened closely, laughing, nodding, asking questions like she had known them forever. For the first time, she didn't feel like a visitor or an outsider. She felt like family. After breakfast, the kids disappeared into their room to dress and prepare for the day. Amelia and Clara stepped out onto the front porch, cups of fresh coffee in hand, the sun warming their faces. The air was crisp but pleasant, and the street was slowly coming to life with neighbors walking dogs and kids on bikes. Amelia exhaled deeply. I used to think being successful meant being busy. Being untouchable. Always moving, always achieving. I don't know what I thought it would give me. Security, Clara said. Control. Escape. Amelia nodded slowly. But it was lonely. All the time. I kept pretending I was fine. I surrounded myself with the right people, the right brands, the right image. But none of them knew me. Clara glanced at her. And now, I feel like I'm finally standing still, Amelia whispered. And everything that matters is here. They sipped their coffee in silence, the breeze catching loose strands of hair, the sun climbing higher in the sky. There was peace in the simplicity, something neither of them had felt in years. It didn't erase the pain or the past, but it dulled the sharp edges, made the future feel possible. Later that morning, the four of them headed out, not in Amelia's luxury car, but in Clara's old sedan. Jacob insisted on sitting next to Amelia in the backseat, showing her his drawings from school. Mia clutched her hand as they walked into the small cafe downtown where Clara had planned a special brunch as a treat. People greeted Clara warmly. She was clearly known and loved in the community. A few curious glances were thrown Amelia's way. She was unfamiliar, her polished elegance still distinct even in casual clothes. But she smiled and nodded, introducing herself with no fanfare. Just Amelia, not the millionaire, not the CEO. Just a woman visiting her friend and her family. At the cafe table, Jacob looked up and asked innocently, "Aunt Amelia, will you come to my school play next month?" She blinked, the title still new on her ears, but it no longer startled her. "Of course I will." Mia leaned in. "Can you braid my hair next time?" Amelia smiled. "You bet." And in those small, ordinary questions, invitations not just to events but into their lives, Amelia felt something sacred, purpose. As they walked back to the car under a soft blue sky, she glanced at Clara, who gave her a knowing smile. "You've got a lot of catching up to do," Clara said. "I know," Amelia replied. "But I'm here now. For all of it." And with those words, a new chapter began, not in marble offices or spotlight stages, but in the heart of a quiet town, in a small house, where laughter echoed down the hall, and two children unknowingly gave a broken woman something she thought she had lost forever. A family, and a reason to stay.